All right. Well, yeah, like I said, I have a pretty unique experience that you wouldn't find very many people having the same journey as I have had. So the job search, I want to go into what this looked like for me, and I'll give you some recommendations along the way. No matter where you are in your program, whether you're just starting out in the PhD program or you're just about to finish, I think this is good information for all of you and something to think about as you go forward with your career. So you're finishing a program at some point. You will be finishing a program, hopefully. What do you do? What's the next steps? How do you embark on this journey of putting yourself on the job market, applying for jobs, making sure your CV is up to date, making sure your letters of offer are, detailed and specific, that sort of thing. How does this process work? How does it unfold? That's what we'll talk about here. I just want to make a note about the different possibilities and resources available to you as a doctoral student. And so you probably are already familiar with many of these. Maybe you've talked about them in some of your classes. The Chronicle of Higher Education is probably the most well-known and maybe the most popular site for applying for jobs in higher education. But there are many, many other opportunities to get in with different websites and apply for positions. And so I wanted to list some of those here. Um, and know that this isn't the exhaustive list. In fact, I'm going to show you two slides here with multiple websites that you can use. And I did use many of these, not just Chronicle of Higher Ed, but I also used Higher Ed Jobs, and I applied to positions through Higher Ed Jobs. There's also Inside Higher Ed Careers. I still get emails from Academic Keys telling me about positions in academia. And then Higher Education Recruitment Consortium. This is known as HERC. I'm going to show you a resource from HERC here in just a little bit. University Jobs, Academic Careers Online. And then also, I want to make a note about some of the resources that are available to maybe underrepresented groups in higher education. And just knowing that these are out there, I think is a great support for people. Um, and when I've been a chair of search committees and been on multiple search committees for hiring faculty members, and we want to make sure, in fact, we require it, that we advertise in some of these outlets just so that we can make sure that we're getting a diverse pool of candidates. And so there's diversejobs.net, there's I Am Diversity, there's the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, Hispanic Outlook in Education, Women in Higher Education, Native American Jobs, LGBTQ plus higher education resources. So just know, and again, these aren't the exhaustive list, but that there are many resources out there for looking at jobs. Some of these websites will have jobs that are specific to certain groups where they're looking to hire, certain populations of people. And so I think that's really great to diversify the workforce. And then just want to make a note about the different job classifications that you'll see as you start to put yourself out there on the market. And again, you probably already know this, but I think it's good to go back and just review. There are adjunct faculty positions that these are part-time, non-tenured, non-tenure track. Oftentimes they're hired on a temporary contract. And it's always a part-time basis. And so there are many, many, many adjunct faculty positions out there. And I'm not going to tell you what career path you want to take or should take. That's up to you to decide what you want to do. I will say that, and I've known friends who have gone through PhD programs that couldn't get a tenure track or even non-tenure track position. And so they took adjunct faculty positions mainly to get experience in the field. And so that is always a possibility that, many job positions will call for experience in higher education. And if you don't have experience teaching in higher ed, that may be a problem. That may be something that is a barrier for you getting a position. And so, taking on an adjunct faculty position could be valuable just in terms of getting experience. And then there would also be non-tenure track, or what we call at NAU career track positions. These are full-time, they're non-tenured, you would never go up for tenure. They tend to have a heavy teaching responsibility and less or no research or scholarship activity in terms of the expectations. So you would have service and teaching, but that's it. And these tend to be salaried positions. Again, they're full time. I will say that if you go into the Chronicle of Higher Education data section, you can actually look up salaries, and it gives you kind of average salaries, and it's really helpful. But typically, not always, but typically, non-tenure track tends to be a lower salary than tenure track positions. And so that can vary. It varies by institution, but it does tend to be a little bit lower salary. And then, of course, there are tenure track positions. These are full-time salaried positions, and this would put you on the tenure track, which is a 6-year process. As you come in as an assistant professor, and you have that really 5 years because you go up in your 6th year for tenure. And in that first 5 years, you're publishing and of course, you're teaching and doing service as well. And there are expectations along those 3 areas, but definitely an expectation in research. And then if you can meet the criteria that the university gives you for going up for promotion and tenure, then you can become a tenured faculty member and, become an associate professor with tenure. And then from there, there's another 6-year period that you don't have to, but you could go up for a full professor position. So I want to tell you a little bit about the process, and we'll get into some specifics as well. I don't have the link on here, but I will just reference it. And if you want to Google this, I'm sure you can find it. It's pretty easy to find. But HERC, the Higher Education Recruitment Consortium, has a guide for how to apply for higher education careers. And this is something that they revise and keep it up to date. So I think it's a really, really great resource, and they have a free ebook. And so if you're in the position where you're going to start looking for higher education careers, then this would be a good thing to take a look at. And I'm just looking at the chat. Okay, thanks, Nesma. So this process of applying for jobs, and obviously for me, it was much different because I was like 10 years of applying for jobs and being on the market, but it can be very long, it can be exhausting, it can be intense. And so as you start to embark on this journey, you really want to take your time and be intentional. And I'll talk about what that means and what to look for. Let me start with some considerations here. So essential components that are typical. So I have, and I'm not trying to boast here, but I probably have more experience being on the job market than the vast majority of people, just because of my unique situation. And so I've seen a lot of what's out there. I've seen the range of what's out there in terms of higher ed positions. But there are some that kind of come to the forefront in terms of required components that you would put into your application materials. Obviously, you're going to have a curriculum vitae. This is something that is pretty standard across the board. No matter what higher education position you're applying for, you're going to attach your CV. You'll always have a cover letter. That cover letter we'll talk about in detail in just a little bit. And then you will also have references, letters of recommendation, and it kind of varies. Sometimes they just want the references, and you'll just list the names and email addresses, phone numbers for your references. And then the letters of rec, I found that that has started to fade away. There are still some universities who will require letters of recommendation, but it's not as common as it used to be. And then transcripts. This is pretty common to include unofficial transcripts in your application materials. And then if you're offered the position and you decide to take the position, then the university would need a copy of your official transcripts. And so you can, go through the process of getting that through your university where you got the degree. Other possible inclusions, and it's just hit or miss. It depends on the institution. It depends on what they're looking for. Still fairly common, but again, they're not always in there. Is to include a teaching philosophy statement, and usually it's often brief, something that's maybe a page to a couple pages on your teaching philosophy. If you're applying for a position that is a tenure track position that would require you to do research and scholarship, then oftentimes there would also be a research statement. This would not only include what you're doing in your research currently and in your doctoral research or dissertation, but also your research plan. And oftentimes what they're looking for is a 5-year plan. So like, what do you see yourself doing over the next 5 years? The 5 years that you would be, a tenure track faculty member before you go up for promotion and tenure. So they're looking for evidence that you have a solid plan. Becoming more relevant and prevalent is a diversity statement. So this is something that I'm seeing increasingly, or was seeing increasingly in my job application materials, so that you would put in a diversity statement. Sometimes they're also looking for sample publications. So they'll ask you for 1 or 2 of your publications that you would include in your application materials. So all of these documents I would have ready to go. I'd have a folder on my computer that contains all of these. I'm making sure that I maintain them, keep them up to date. I've got them all ready to go in a PDF format. The vast majority of applications are going to happen online. I don't know of anybody who's not applying online anymore, although I think some people still allow for that, but most likely you're going to apply online. There's going to be an online portal that you'll go through. Sometimes you can do that through the Chronicle of Higher Education website. Sometimes it'll just, in fact, most of the time, it'll just take you to the university's website. That's where you'll create an account and submit your application materials for that position. And so I would have all these documents ready to go, in a PDF format. Want to also just talk about the minimum and preferred qualifications, and I would encourage you, no matter where you are in your program, I would encourage you to start looking at job ads. Even now, even if you've still got 5 years before you're going to graduate, you just started your program, start looking at job ads. There's a fairly common approach to the job ad. It'll tell you a little bit about the university, tell you a little bit about the college, usually the College of Ed. That's what I would be applying to. And then it'll tell you specifically what the position is. And then every job ad, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen it done differently. Every job ad is going to have a minimum and preferred qualifications. The minimum, so the search committee that's put together is going to review every application that comes in. And they're going to have 1 or 2 people on the search committee, maybe everybody, but they're going to review each application for minimum. If they don't meet the minimums, they won't even review the rest of the materials. They'll say, no, this doesn't meet the minimum. So for example, if the position has a PhD or EDD in the minimum qualifications and you haven't obtained that yet, then they're not going to necessarily even go any further with it, unless it says in the minimum qualifications ABD, all but dissertation is accepted. Then in that case, they might look at it and say, yeah, you meet the minimums. So minimum, oftentimes they're looking for a PhD or EDD in the field. For education, like for my area, they're looking for 3 to 5 years of teaching experience in like elementary ed, which is my area. They're often looking for higher education experience. And these are just some of the very, very many, and it's diverse and it varies. There's a wide range of what they would look for in the minimum. And then preferred, this is going to be highly variable based on the specifics of the job and the field. But these are probably the most important. Yes, you want to make sure you meet the minimums. If you read through the job ad and you don't meet the minimums, then I would say don't even apply for the position, because it's going to be a waste of your time and the search committee is just going to cut it off, right? They're going to say, yeah, that you don't meet the minimums and we're not even going to review that. So make sure you're doing your due diligence. But the preferred qualifications are extremely important because this is now where you are going to be scored on a matrix. So the search committee is going to go through and say, yes, you met your minimum qualifications, and they're going to review the rest of your materials, all the things that they asked you to submit. They're going to look at your CV and your cover letter. They're going to look at your publications that you attach. They're going to look at your teaching statement and research statement, diversity statement. And what they'll do is they'll go through and they'll have a ranking, and they'll have like 0 to 15 points. So there's this rubric that goes with it. And the search committee has been responsible for designing the rubric, what they're looking for in the materials, and they're going to rank you compared to other candidates. And it can be highly competitive out there. I'll show you some statistics in just a moment, but there are some searches where the search committee chair has told me specifically, I don't think they're supposed to say, but they'll say, yeah, we received 80 applications for this position. And so now they're going through and trying to narrow that down, to the 5 to 10 that they want to invite for a first round phone interview, and then the eventual, 1 to 3 that they want to bring on campus. So for your cover letter, and I'll talk about this again in just a moment, be very, very specific. Make sure that you are addressing both the minimum and preferred qualifications in your letter and in your other application materials. Make sure it's easily accessible to the search committee, and kind of think through, like, look at your application materials. Is it evident in my materials, in my letter, that I meet this minimum qualification or this preferred qualification? I can't tell you how often I've been on a search committee where the materials that are sent in are vague, and it's hard to tell if they meet the minimums or preferreds. And they might, but because they were vague in their application materials, it's very difficult to even say they've met the minimum or the preferreds because they didn't specifically address that. So make sure you're very specific in how you're addressing those minimum and preferreds in the job ad. Just some statistics. This comes from the Survey of Earned Doctorates, and then also the National Science Foundation. And some of the data here is also from the National Center for Education Statistics. But 63% of doctoral degree graduates in education will find employment around the time of degree conferral. But that employment includes all types. So that would be NTT, that would be adjunct, that would be maybe administrative positions, other types of employment in higher education. And only 30 to 40% of doctoral degree graduates in education will find tenure track positions immediately following the completion of their degree. So this is a pretty small number. 60 to 70% of people completing their degree will not be able to find a tenure track position immediately following the completion of their degree. It doesn't mean they won't eventually find one, but there may be a more, a windy road to that path, right? So you take on an adjunct role and get some experience, or you take on a postdoc position somewhere and, get some research experience or whatever it might be. But, it might be a more windy path to get there. The market, I'll tell you, is highly, highly competitive. Higher education is churning out more PhDs than ever before. And we have perhaps fewer and fewer positions. available. And I'm painting a bleak picture on purpose because I want you to know that this isn't going to be something that's easy. This is something that you really need to pay attention to and be specific and plan for as you're completing your degree program. You can't just focus all of your attention and mental effort on getting your degree and then cross the bridge of getting a job after the fact. Like, oh, I finished my degree, I graduated. Now what? This is something that you should be working towards even within your degree program. Are you getting publications? Are you working at, presenting at conferences? Are you working with faculty members to, put yourself in on grants, those kinds of things that will give you the experience that you need now in order to get the position later. So know that this is highly competitive. Also know that graduates of R1 institutions are going to have a much higher probability of securing a tenure track position as compared with people who are coming out of smaller institutions. So just know that, when you're competing, this isn't a level, fair playing field necessarily. Although NAU is, I believe, currently an R2 institution, so that's good. That puts you maybe in a better position to secure a tenure track position than someone that's coming out of like a small college somewhere. All right. So I want to get into the specifics of the cover letter, the CV, the interviews, how to navigate job offers. There are all kinds of templates online for writing a cover letter specifically for higher ed. And so feel free to kind of sort through that. All of those resources that I showed you earlier, like the Chronicle, Herc, Higher Ed, those will all have resources as well to help you write out your cover letters and your CVs. So in the cover letter, as you're starting to apply for positions, and I mentioned this earlier, but you really want to be specific and target not only those minimum and preferreds that we talk about, because that's super important. That's what the search committee is going to be looking for. But you also want to make sure that you are targeting the institution's mission and vision statement, that you're looking at their conceptual frameworks. Maybe that's by college, like the College of Ed has a conceptual framework. Maybe they have specific DEI language. Maybe they have a strategic plan, like NAU has their Elevating Excellence plan. So you're going to do your research ahead of time and make sure that you know the institution that you're applying for, that you've researched it well, you've gone through the College of Ed website, you've read about their mission and vision and conceptual framework, all of that. And now when you write your letter, you're going to specifically use language from the university. And you're going to say, all right, here's how I fit with the university or college's conceptual framework. The work that I've been doing really fits with their conceptual framework, or my personal philosophy on diversity, equity, and inclusion really fits with your goals and statements as a university, or, for NAU's strategic plan of elevating excellence, I would use some of the language, right, from the Elevating Excellence document in my letter. So I'm targeting the institution's specific frameworks. I'm also targeting the minimum and preferred qualifications, as we talked about earlier. I'm making sure that I address those specifically. It's clear, it's detailed, and I can't stress how important that is to make sure that the search committee, who is trying to objectively look at your materials, that they know that you've met the minimums, that they know that you've met the preferreds, right? You've very clearly listed that out in your letter. It's evident in your CV. I want to just make a note about this bolded point here. Never, ever, 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 if you want a job, never, ever, ever use the scattershot method. And the scattershot method, if you're unfamiliar with it, is I'll just write a letter, a generic letter about who I am and what I've done. and I'll send it out to every university that I apply for. Search committees are made up of highly intelligent, highly educated people. They will be able to spot that very quickly. And we'll make comments in our search committees of, yeah, this person didn't talk about our university at all. They don't know who we are. They didn't say anything about us. It's evident from their letter that they just sent this out, to probably everybody. So make sure that your letter, your application materials are specific to the position. You do your research ahead of time. You make sure that this isn't some just generic letter that you're sending out. All right, so your letter is also going to be addressed to the search committee chair or the chair of the department. Don't use to whom it may concern. Now, I'll say this, that in a lot of the job ads, they, like, I don't know, maybe 40% of the time, and I'm just kind of going off of my own experience and trying to remember, often they won't list a search committee chair. They won't list a specific person. Many times they do. Many times they'll say, please address your letters to this person who's the chair of the department, or this person who's the chair of the search committee. And that's great. And now you know who to address the letter to. But many times they don't. And when they don't, then you do your research. Maybe call that department or that college and say, hey, I'm going to be applying for this position. Is there someone specific that I can address my letter to? Okay, so you would look into that. I wouldn't use to whom it may concern. Again, that goes into the vague piece that, like, you just didn't put in the effort to know who you're applying to, right? So be sure to keep a professional tone, but demonstrate enthusiasm. You want to work here, you want to come here, you want to come to this place. Avoid repetition. So make sure that your letter is fairly brief, that it isn't something that just repeats, where you're just repeating yourself over and over and over again, that it's not redundant. And then, like I said a few times, make sure you do your research. Typical, and I'm going to show you my letter, one of my letters as an example, and I'm going to show you my CV as an example here in a few moments. But I want to just say that typical letters are between 1 and 2 pages. Okay, they want you to keep it brief. So you're trying to fit in everything that you've done on 1 or 2 pages, and how you meet their minimum and preferred qualifications, and how you're, matching up with the university's mission and vision, all of that good stuff. So you're trying to do that in 1 to 2. The example that I'm going to show you from mine isn't maybe the best example, because my letter is like 3 full pages, but I've also done a lot of stuff, and so I'm trying to fit everything I've done into the letter. But usually the goal is 1 to 2 pages for that. The curriculum vitae, many of you probably have already started building your CV, and I'll say that, some universities, and it's not common, but some will actually ask for just a 1-page, like a resume, like they're just asking for a very abbreviated version of your CV. And you have to really be selective about what you're putting on to that 1 page. That's not super common. Most of the time you can turn in your full CV. Like my CV is, I think, almost 40 pages. And then they'll look through all your materials. So just know that sometimes they might ask for something that's a little different. So I'm gonna, in a few moments, I'm gonna show you, I'll stop sharing the Prezi, and I'll share a document with you in the chat that I'd love for you to open up, and I'll send this to Nesma as well, so that maybe she can email it out to anybody who's interested. But it has just a whole bunch of tips and recommendations for what to put in the CV and how to make your CV stand out. So, and I'll show you my example as well. But we'll get to that. And then the interviews. So the first round interview is usually via Zoom or phone, although phone is kind of fading away. And it can last anywhere between 20 minutes to 1 hour. And so if you've made it to this phase, this means you're one of the top 5 to 10 candidates typically. means you've already met the minimum requirements, which is great. And it means you've scored well enough on the preferred qualifications by the search committee that they've deemed you a decent enough fit that they want to, they want to interview you. So at this point, when they conduct this initial interview, this first round interview, the committee is trying to find their top 1 to 3 candidates that they could then bring onto campus for an in-person visit. Increasingly, when I first started in 2014, putting myself on the job market, the vast majority of the time when I would go and interview, it would be one interview, on the phone at that point. And then it would be, there's a second, more formal interview in the in-person on-campus visit. Increasingly, that is no longer the case. So it doesn't mean you couldn't see that. You might still see that, but increasingly, the interview is considered the Zoom interview. The first interview that you do is considered the interview. And then if you're invited for a second round interview, to come on campus, you might meet with the search committee, but there's not a formal interview that goes with it. It's just kind of a debrief, ask questions, talk to the search committee, that sort of thing. So just know that that's a trend that I've been seeing. If you make the second round, congratulations, you're a finalist for the position. You're one of the top candidates. Usually there's going to be 1 to 3. Typically 2, somewhere in that range, but they want to bring a couple people onto campus so that they can make their final decision. So this means you're one of the top people for the position. You'll be invited for an on-campus visit, most likely, although it is increasingly frequent that that second round visit will just be Zoom. And part of that is just budget issues and universities maybe not wanting to spend as much on airfare for a candidate to come out or for 2 candidates to come out, and hotel stays and meals and all the stuff that goes with bringing a candidate onto campus. So you might see just a second round Zoom, meeting. But if you're invited on campus, be prepared for a pretty intense, draining experience that can last 2 to 3 days. The longest I had was 3 full days of just meeting with people and interviewing and, doing different things on campus, taking tours of the community, meeting with a real estate agent, those kinds of things can happen during this time. But it could be 2 to 3 days, and it can be very intense and draining. So typically what's going to happen is you're going to meet with various people on campus. You'll definitely have a meeting with the chair of the department. You'll have a meeting with the dean. They'll tell you their expectations for someone coming in. You'll meet with various faculty, perhaps, definitely you'll meet with the search committee, but you might meet with other faculty as well. You'll meet with HR representatives who will go over benefits with you. You might meet with like provost level positions. And I'm not talking necessarily like the provost. I'm talking about like vice provosts for, different areas that you might be relevant to the position. So there are various stakeholders that you're going to meet with. You'll be asked to, this is very common, you'll be asked to give a teaching presentation. And if you're applying for a tenure track position, you'll be asked to give a research presentation. And, these are typically 30 minutes to an hour, somewhere in that range. And some universities will combine the teaching and research presentations into just one, what they call job talk. So that's becoming increasingly frequent. They'll just say, prepare a job talk. And you have to like go and Google, like, what's a job talk? I don't even know what that is. But anyway, the job talk is just you coming in and saying like, here's what I would teach. Here's my research. Here's how I would include my research in my teaching, that sort of thing. And usually they'll give you a specific prompt. There might be a secondary interview with the search committee, as I already talked about, although that's becoming less common. And then you'll attend lunches and dinners with various stakeholders. So a lot of times they'll have you meet with students, and the students will take you out to a lunch, or or to a dinner. You might have a dinner with the search committee and they'll try to take you to a fancy place. I think here at NAU, we take people to 1899 and that's our go-to spot. But anyway, so just know that this is a pretty long, intense process. You start at like 8 a.m. Someone will come pick you up at your hotel and you're going all the way through like dinner. And it's a full day. With maybe some breaks built in, but it's a very full day and you're just on the entire time, constantly trying to put that professional front forward and explain the things that you do and have done and your publications and experience and teaching experience. And it's just a lot. It can be very tiring and exhausting. And then just to give you a little bit more information about the teaching and research presentations or the job talks. So these are the most critical aspects of the second round process. This is really what the committee is focusing on. When you meet with people like the chair or the dean, like, yes, they're getting a good, you want to give a good impression and that sort of thing and be professional and enthusiastic. But they're really taking a look at those teaching and research presentations because that's where they're going to start to determine, the differentiation between like this candidate and this candidate. This candidate's research and teaching is a little bit of a better fit for our university, so we're going to go with them, right? That's where the decisions are made. So some things that you need to know, like who is your audience? Sometimes it's students. Sometimes you're going to go in and teach a class, and these are students. More often than not, it's going to be faculty. So you're just going to give a presentation to faculty and they're going to invite all the faculty from the college or maybe just the department to come in. There will be some administrators in there. Maybe the chair or dean will come in and see your presentation. Sometimes it's both. So sometimes you'll have students and faculty and administrators all in there together watching you present. You'll want to make sure you know how long the presentation is so that you can prepare for this ahead of time. Oftentimes, they won't give you a lot of time ahead of time to prepare. So they'll give you, and they need to keep it the same for every candidate so that it's fair. So you might get a couple of days, maybe ahead of time, where they send you the prompt and say, all right, in 2 days time, when you fly out, here's your prompt and you need to prepare for that. So it's not a lot of time often. You got to put something together on the fly, perhaps. And so that's a lot of work to get prepared for going out for the interview. You'll need to know what materials and technology you'll need, what will be available, what's in the room, what can I use. And I'm just going to tell you this, on occasion, the committee will ask you to teach a specific class. And sometimes they'll even ask you to teach a specific topic. And I can't tell you how much I hated these. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you're different from me, but I hated this when they gave me a specific class and a specific topic. For example, one time I was asked to give a presentation to an education law class on, making sure that you meet components of the state law or something like that, which is not my area of expertise. That has nothing to do with what I do as an elementary, like science education person. And it made no sense whatsoever for me to teach that topic. And yet that's what they wanted. And so I had to come up with some presentation. So, a few times throughout my, going on to campuses, I was asked to teach a specific topic that may not be the best fit. So you have to be careful with that and just make sure you prepare as much as you can. Your presentation should be specific to your research, who you are, to your teaching interests, what you do. But you should also cater your presentation, making sure that you're using language that fits the university and college's mission statements, vision statements, making sure that you're kind of fitting in with their conceptual framework, making sure that you're using language that aligns with their strategic plan. This is the kind of stuff that the committee is going to be looking for and saying, hey, their presentation really aligned well with our university or our college or our department. So this is the candidate. This is the person we want to offer the position to. So really make sure that you're doing your research ahead of time and fitting in some of that language, like specifically say, in your teaching presentation. Yeah, I was researching your conceptual framework and I saw that you used, UDL in your practice, and I would love, I also use UDL and here's how I do it, that kind of thing. So make sure that you're they can tell that you've done your research ahead of time. Um, and then this would also be a good time to know your audience. And I'm just going to shamelessly put this in there and other faculty who might watch this, you can give your own opinions on this, but I think it does look good. Um, this would be a good place to know the search committee. So you should know the members of the search committee ahead of time. You'll meet them in the interview, like the first round interview. Research those people. What are their research interests? What do they do? What are their publications? And now you can just, and it doesn't need to be a big focus, and it shouldn't be a big focus, but you might just say, oh, and Dr. So-and-so, I know that you've written a publication in this area, and here's how my research really kind of fits in with that topic, that kind of thing. So you might just kind of make those little comments just to let them know that you know who they are. You've researched them as much as they are researching you. Use possible future tense language. Like, if I were to be offered the position, I would do this. I would love to be a part of this at the university. So just make sure that you're being careful with the language that you use, never saying like, well, when I get the position, I'll do this. You don't want to be arrogant and presume that you're going to get the offer. And so once you get the job offer, and this is maybe more subjective, and I'm telling you this from personal experience. So Gretchen, if you watch this later, or other faculty, if you watch this, maybe you can give your own personal insights into this. But once you get an offer, yes, this is exciting, and yes, it's competitive, and yes, offers don't come along very often, right? They don't grow on trees. This isn't like everybody gets a job after they graduate just because you have a PhD. There are some things that you need to think about, and that might lead to you turning down an offer. And I'm not advocating for that, so please don't misunderstand. But I have seen it so often. I have a lot of friends in academia outside of NAU, people who've gone through different PhD programs, and I see this often enough that I thought this was worthwhile to share. Someone takes a position and it's just not a good fit, and within a couple years they're already looking for something else. Or someone takes a position and the cost of living in that community is so ridiculously high they can't afford to live, and they're trying to find something else. Or someone takes a position and they've lived in one state their entire life, and now they're going somewhere else, and honestly they get homesick and they're looking for any excuse to get back to their home, right? And so there are some things that you do need to think through with your family and the people around you. So is the position the best fit for you? I just want to give a quick example. There was a position that I was offered the position, and one of the classes that they wanted me to teach was a dance education class. And like yes, I was going to teach like my area. And so I think for that one it was social studies, because I do science and social studies, and so I was going to teach social studies methods, which was great. But they also had this dance education class, and I met with the chair, and they were like, yeah, you're going to teach that class too. And it just is like, what? I don't know anything about dance. That's I don't I don't even like to dance, So like, why am I doing this? So is the position the best fit for you? That's something to think through. Is the community the best fit for you? Sometimes you go into a community that just really is maybe different from your personal belief system. And it's going to be a hardship to live there. Are the benefits worth the move for you and your family? Maybe the benefits are just terrible, and you're not going to be able to get the medical and dental and vision and retirement benefits that you would love to get. And so maybe there's something else somewhere else that would allow you to meet your goals. Here's a big one. This is a hard one for faculty and Flagstaff. I can tell you, we struggle to bring people in, high quality candidates that want to stay here, because the cost of living is so high, and the salary doesn't necessarily match the cost of living. That's very, very difficult for people. So they come in and they get their initial kind of low-ish salary comparatively, and they just can't afford to live there. They can't get a house. They can't sustain it. So is the housing market affordable? What support will you have if you take the position? And that's a good one to ask in the interview. Like, are there faculty mentors or coaches that can come alongside me and help guide me in this process, especially if it's tenure track and I'm trying to, go up for tenure and promotion in a few years? Can you realize your personal and professional goals in this position? And again, that's an important one. If you can't realize that, if you can't picture yourself being able to do that, maybe this isn't the best fit for you. Will the position be too much work? There was one position that they had their requirements for tenure that they had showed me during the interview process, and it was extremely intense. Not only in quality, but in quantity. You had to have this many publications, and they have to be high impact, and it was more than any other position that I had applied for. And it was that like publish or perish, sink or swim attitude at the university. And it was like, I don't know that I want to do that. Like, you're still a human being, you still have a family and a life and that sort of thing. And so make sure that the position is a good fit for you. Like, take your mental health seriously. Um, can you negotiate salary, benefits, work accommodations, classes taught, load? Most often you can, within reason, obviously. And so that's something that if you get the offer, don't try to do this before the offer is made, but if you get the offer and you're trying to weigh some of these questions that we've gone through, this is where you could come back to the chair who's maybe making the offer to you, or the dean who's making the offer, and say, hey, can you budge on that salary a little bit? I'm making this much at my current job, and this salary is a little low. I would love to make a little bit more, or, can I teach these classes instead? Or, my load coming in, whatever it might be, some of those things are negotiable, and you can work that out with the person who's made the offer to you, typically the chair or the dean. And I'll be fairly brief on this process because I want to get to the document that I wanted to show you, and then we'll have a time for questioning at the end. But once you take the job, and I'm specifically focusing now on tenure track. Non-tenure track is going to be different. You're going to have a teaching load, 4 usually, so 12 credits per semester. And so anyway, NTT is going to be different, right? But this is specifically for tenure track positions. If you were to be offered a tenure track position and you accept it, you sign your contract. Now what? What do you do? You've got the next 5 years to try to meet the criteria that the university and college has laid out in their policies. And so that can be a very intense process. That's something that I'm currently in. And I'll just make a note of all those publications and presentations that I shared with you at the beginning. That'll count as kind of my cumulative folder, but within the 5 years that I'm an assistant professor, there's a lot that I have to do. There are publications I have to do. There are grants that I have to apply for. There are, specific things within my teaching that I have to show evidence of. There are specific service requirements that I'm going to have to make sure that I fit into the next 5 years so that I can evidence and showcase that I've met all the criteria areas for promotion and tenure. And so I wanted to show you this. Up to 70% of tenure track faculty will attain promotion and tenure, and that's a pretty significant percentage. That's good. If you don't get tenure, most often you're going to have to leave. You will not be able to stay in your position at the university. So if you were denied promotion and tenure, you leave, you go somewhere else, and maybe you try it again. But so 70% will get promotion and tenure, although that is a lower percentage for research intensive universities like R1. So if you take an R1 position and they have a very intense, high expectation for research and scholarship, publications, presentations, that number drops down to 50 to 60%. So now maybe only half of people who are brought in as a tenure track faculty will actually be granted or attain the rank of associate professor and be given tenure. So also, and I hate this, but this is just something to keep an eye on. Keep in mind that women and faculty of color often face additional hurdles due to, and I thought this was interesting when I was researching for this presentation, due to heavier service load expectations. So women and faculty of color are often kind of dumped on in terms of service more so than anything else, which can then impact their time and effort and ability to be able to do the research that they need to do, to write their publications, to apply for presenting at conferences and that sort of thing. And so the statistics were, showing that women and faculty of color will often have a lower percentage of people being able to be granted, tenure and promotion because of really systemic racism, and sexism, which is a horrible aspect and something that we should all work to impact and fix. So some key takeaways, and I'll show you the document which has some specifics on it in just a moment, but know the expectations up front. Ask this in the interview. Hey, what are the requirements for promotion and tenure if it's a tenure track position? Know this ahead of time. Know it up front. Don't just come in and what can happen for new faculty is they kind of get lost in that faculty, like, I'm just trying to figure out this whole world of academia. I'm trying to figure out how to teach my classes, how to navigate the university system. I have to learn all the, acronyms and names of different things that we do in our college or department. And they can kind of get lost in that. And then all of a sudden, it's like year 5, and they're scrambling to try to get some publications in or to do some specific things in their teaching or service. So know the expectations up front. Don't forget them. Devise a plan for accomplishing those criteria areas that are given to you over the 5-year period before going up for promotion in the 6th year. So you've got a 5-year plan of here's how I'm going to try to get this accomplished for, like, if it's 5 publications, all right, I need to get 1 publication each year. So I'm going to really work hard to do that. Or if I need to serve in a national, do some service in a national organization, I really need to make sure that I'm networking and looking for those opportunities that I can serve in a national organization. So you're going to create that plan. Doesn't always go to plan, that's fine, but you know what's expected of you. And then seek guidance from experienced faculty mentors, people who have been through this process, people who sit on P&T committees, people who are part of this, that they can give you guidance and point you in the right direction if you have questions and that sort of thing. Be sure to communicate clearly and consistently with your chair and dean so they know, or their expectations. And that's why usually you'll have a statement of expectations, an SOE in your work that will tell you exactly what they want you to do each year, each semester. And then as part of your annual review process, which is common to most, universities, you'll kind of show the evidence year after year of how you're meeting your statement of expectations and how you're kind of working on this path towards promotion and tenure. And then have a clear, focused line of inquiry in your research. And so this one was something that was hard for me because I've done a lot of scholarship in a lot of different areas that not necessarily are related. And so as a tenure track faculty, I really have to hone that into a specific line of inquiry. So for me, that would be science and play, and how play, free play and science areas can help develop like conceptual understandings. I've researched and published in that area, and that's kind of what I'm working on for going up for tenure here in a few years.